Welcome to Boston TechCrunch Live. I'm Matt Burns. I'm thrilled to be here. We're hosting a special event today, and it's all about Boston. Several times a year, TechCrunch Live likes to take a virtual trip to different cities across North America to highlight the different ecosystems in those areas. And today we're in Boston. In June, we're going to Atlanta, and maybe we'll check out some other areas later this year. We have 2 hours of programming for you today, and you get to hear from some of the best and the brightest in the Boston area. You're going to hear from Greg Drakon of 406 Ventures, Matt Coffey out of Ort. He's one of the many CEOs of the cybersecurity firms that call Boston home. We have Mr. Boston Robots himself, Mark Raybert, speaking on Boston Dynamic and his role as the leader of the Boston Dynamics Hyundai AI Institute. That's a mouthful. Then we're going to have a conversation with Mask Challenges CEO Kat Broom on the role and growth of the nonprofit program. Both were recorded earlier, and I've got to say, you have to watch these things, and you're going to want to hear what Kat and Mark has to say about building companies in Boston. Lastly, we have to have a pitch off, so we do. It's hosted by TechCrunch's Hyatt Camps, and we have 3 early-stage Boston companies that are competing to be fast-tracked into TechCrunch's Startup Battlefield 200 cohort. With that, they get free admission and exhibition space at TechCrunch's Disrupt conference this September in San Francisco. That pitch-off starts in about an hour and a half from now, and I hope you stick around for it. I have one announcement, and then we're going to talk to Greg and Matt. Today's event is all virtual, but TechCrunch is hosting a huge in-person event in Boston this April. It's just for early stage founders. If that's you, there's still space available, and the TechCrunch events team tells me the tickets are currently discounted. So I guess that means they're going to go up sometime soon. Jump on it before they jump in price. The event is in April. It's called Early Stage. And it features roundtables, Q&As with investors, workshops, and pitch deck trainings. And then I'll be hosting a pitch coaching session with our Startup Battlefield editor, Nisha Tambe. There's a lot happening around early stage in Boston, too. And the TechCrunch events team tells me that they're going to be emailing attendees with invites to exclusive community events really soon. I really, truly hope to see you there. So with that, let's go to Greg and Matt. And I want to talk about their fair city, Boston, Massachusetts. Greg, Matt, how are you?
Doing well, thanks, Matt. How about yourself?
Oh, good. That fair city, that felt really good to say. I'm a huge listener of Car Talk Radio. They really painted Boston in a good light for me.
It's one of many good shows here.
Yeah, Greg, let's start with you. You've been investing in the Boston area since 2007. What keeps you in Boston?
Boy, there's a lot to list there. I mean, Boston is one of those communities that has all the different ingredients you need to build companies. A lot of good technology, good institutions, tons of graduates coming out with tech degrees, early adopters close by, train right away. Everything's so close here that if you pick the right segment and end domain, it's really, really your advantage to build a startup here. So we formed 406 here 17 years ago, purposely because it's great. Boston is great for the 3 areas in which we invest, and it continues to thrive.
Yeah. Now, if only you guys could have a winning baseball team, it would be all set. So, according to PitchBook, the Boston area is the 4th largest VC investment market in the country, trailing in order San Francisco, New York City, and LA. But numbers are one thing. I'm hoping, Greg and Matt, if you can tell me what the vibe is like right now going in 2023.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, Matt, or feel free to jump in.
Yeah, Greg, let's start with you.
Certainly. So the vibe is actually really, really strong here, I believe. Boston used to be where venture capital started. So way back in the 70s and 80s, this is where it began. We have what was called the Telecom Highway, which is an interstate Route 128 that goes kind of west of Boston. And then, frankly, we kind of lost our mojo a little bit. I think a lot of investors were going later stage. They moved west. Obviously, there's a lot of great stuff going out west, but we've never lost the ability to build really deep technology. We're not great at marketing ourselves in some ways. So there are certain areas that I would not recommend Boston for. But if you're building any companies that are doing deep technology, it's never left. What has changed in the past, I'd say, decade and a half since we started 406, is that whereas prior, if you built a great company and you were acquired, you were often moved to wherever that acquirer was headquartered. And there were very few public company success stories here. That's changed a lot. We now have a lot of public companies that went public, stayed here. We have big companies like VMware and others buying companies and creating their headquarters for certain divisions here. So Boston, in my opinion, has only gotten better over the past decade and a half. Never lost its mojo, but now I think we have the full flywheel spinning from startup to building to selling. And then we have those entrepreneurs just wanting to do it again and again. So we're excited to be here. We feel we were lucky to pick Boston 17 years ago, and now we're kind of in the catbird seat. We try not to tell too many investors because we enjoy having it here to ourselves.
Yeah. Now, Matt, what's your take on the Boston market right now?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome vibe. I think right now there's a lot of trepidation going into 2023 from an economic perspective, and potentially a little bit of investment holdback. However, I think historically going into this year, like Greg said, like echoing everything that he said, it's just an awesome scene that's a good mixture of different types of resources that lend themselves really well to where we are today, which is a vibrant community that isn't just SaaS companies. It's a really strong mixture of health tech and biotech and security and fintech and all these other pieces. It's like you almost have a microcosm of New York and San Francisco in Boston. So there's a little bit of everything for everybody.
If you could identify what type of person or what type of founder is a good founder fit for the Boston area, and then Greg, for you too, what's a good founder fit for 406? Matt, can we start with
the founder fit for Boston? So also echoing what Greg said, that this is a deep tech place, whether it's biotech or it's security. These companies, and there are other things that are a little bit lighter, but for example, I live out in the boonies. In my backyard, the town over, there's a prototype fusion reactor, which is from Commonwealth Fusion, which is out of MIT, but it's like, you're not going to find that everywhere in the country. Just the amount of deep tech, especially like cybersecurity, these are deep like systems problems. And so if you're solving a hard technical problem, I can't think of a better place than Boston to do it.
Great. Greg?
Yeah, so as far as what kind of founders we look for, we focus on 3 segments: enterprise healthcare, data and cloud, and cybersecurity. I lead our cyber practice. We look for the same type of entrepreneurs across the board. That is, Matt's a perfect prototype: deep technology understanding, great network to get a company off the ground and hire that key team. And then ideally, someone that can sell the first $1 million to $3 million of ARR of a company. So founders that have that tech background, but also are out there in the community and know how to build and have the energy that people are attracted to.
Mm-hmm. And then what about Boston? What have you seen in Boston over the years?
From the entrepreneurial standpoint?
Yeah, what type of founder tends to be successful there?
So, I don't want to repeat too many things Matt said, but they tend to be those that are networked into the tech communities. You have to be, it's a bit of a combination of an introvert extrovert in my mind. And I say that only because I'm right in the middle. If you do that test, I'm slightly introverted, but I can play extrovert when I need to. We find good founders are introverted enough, often have that tech background, but they can get out there, build those networks up, know how to sell. They can turn it on when they have to. And Boston has a lot of them, honestly. There are 128 colleges and universities in Massachusetts alone, and they all have specialist degrees in cyber. There's almost 40 now that offer cybersecurity bachelorette programs. And then if you expand that to the rest of New England, there's 250 universities and colleges. So there's just so many STEM graduates here. You often find that persona I'm describing.
Yeah, exactly. We need to talk about cybersecurity because both of you are heavily involved in that. What do you think makes Boston so unique or drawn to that work?
Yeah, I could take that one. I think from a cyber perspective, there's a rich history here of cyber companies getting off the ground, whether that's so for example, in just Greg's portfolio at Point406, companies like Carbon Black, companies like Randori, like were recently acquired by IBM. So really strong companies, but also beyond that, like Rapid7, for example, is here. Sneak is here. Some people will say that Datadog is becoming a security company. So Datadog, I think there's a rich history of it. But like, why is that happening? It comes back to that kind of deep tech background. I guess 2 things. One would be like, you've got MIT where you have a lot of that kind of, cryptography research going on and a lot of really deep technical expertise, both there as well as other universities and colleges around here. The half joking reason that I usually use is that it's a nice stopover point between Tel Aviv and the West Coast. And so there's a confluence here of academic research as well as the right talent from Israel, which is, at least a big part of our company.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Right. Well, let's talk about Ort for just a moment. Tell me about what you guys do and where you're going right now.
Sure. So Ort, we are a Series A cybersecurity company based in Boston, obviously. We focus on the problem of account takeover. So if you think of any enterprise, go back, think about last year. Okta had a breach back in January. Over the summer, you had a series of breaches, everything from Twilio to Uber to a bunch of airlines. And then later in the year, you've got companies like GitHub and Slack and things like this. All of these, there's a pattern. It's no longer hackers, exploiting like software vulnerabilities because of errors in code and like buffer overflows. That's not what's happening. What's happening now is employee accounts at these companies, whether it's Uber or Twilio or Okta or whatever, are having those accounts taken over by hackers through phishing and through spear phishing and tricking those employees to giving over their credentials and pressing the allow button on their multi-factor app so they can get in. Unfortunately, there's not much out there looking at this. Everything that we have in our security toolbox is looking at network logs and looking at device telemetry, but really looking at what are these identities? Who are they? What do they have access to? What are they doing with that access is absent today from the security toolbox. And that's exactly what Ort does. Ort comes into an enterprise organization. We give you the lay of the land. Here's your identity attack surface. You've got 10,000 identities that could be taken over in any moment. And here are the ones that are most vulnerable. And we help you fix that. And then we help you monitor the behavior of those identities going forward, just in case somebody does take it over. And so this is like the number one attack vector. And we're right there helping enterprise chief security officers stop it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How did you meet Greg, Matt?
It's a good question. I think we were introduced by a mutual acquaintance like a couple of years ago. Greg, is that right?
I think that's right. Maybe one of our CISO council members.
Yes, definitely. Michael Smith, if I recall. So we met just through the ecosystem. So to Greg's point, it's all about networking here. And we're fortunate that we're not at the size of like New York, where you can't really know everybody. If you're in security in Boston, you can pretty much know who's who, like who's out there and who everybody is. And so Greg, when I think about him, he is my go-to guy for cybersecurity investing in Boston. Everybody knows Greg as the cybersecurity investor in the Boston scene.
Yeah, generally, Greg, I list the board seats that you have during my intro, but you have too many. I didn't have time to do that. Yeah, how do you keep up? But really, I would like to know what brought you to Matt and Ort at the beginning.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we are pretty thematic investors. So every year we try to develop theses around what problems need to be solved that we can't find a solution for. So a couple of years ago, our team developed a thesis around identity security. And at that time, if you recall, the pandemic kind of accelerated this trend of you want to work wherever you are, whenever you want to. And the perimeter just disappeared. We used to all log into a network or we'd VPN into our company, all gone very, very quickly. So it accelerated this problem that the perimeter, the identity became the perimeter. And now people have more than just employees. They've got contractors, they've got service accounts. Everything's touching your infrastructure. And as Matt said, hackers don't hack in anymore, they log in. It's not that hard to get someone's credentials. So we'd started looking for a company that really understood how to give a chief information security officer full visibility of his or her identity perimeter. And then more importantly, how to identify attacks. And I must have spent 18 months looking at a couple dozen companies solving pieces of the identity problem. And I felt like they're all very interesting, some great entrepreneurs, but they weren't doing a big enough piece of the pie. And that's a little bit of the scar tissue from Carbon Black. The old antivirus world was completely turned on its head by EDR, endpoint detect and response, where you started to look at behaviors instead of just signatures of bad things touching your infrastructure. So when I met Matt through our mutual friend, the light bulb, it was exactly what I'd been looking for, frankly. They not only could look at, I won't give you their secret sauce, how they do it, but they can't only tell you your identity perimeter in a static basis, but they go a step further and look at dynamic movement of people touching these identities and can monitor the vulnerabilities for you. So they help you make it more secure, but then they also help you kind of keep an eye on everything and make sure that you're not breached. So it just fit a thesis that we developed, knew very quickly when I met Matt and his team. They're the type of founders we love. And we were lucky to let them join us on their journey about a year ago.
What do you remember about that first pitch meeting?
The first pitch meeting, man, Matt, you're gonna have to remind me about this one.
That's a good one. So I think we got connected between rounds, Greg. So it wasn't, and this is important for anybody listening, is like, you don't build a relationship with a VC in the process of raising your round. I think getting to know them kind of in between, in this case, between seed and Series A. And for us, that was a 18-month time period. And I think somewhere in there got to talking to Greg. And so when it came time to raise the Series A, it wasn't like going out and scrambling. It was like, I called up 3 of the investors who I thought would be awesome to work with. Greg was one of them. And then we took it from there. So the pitch, I guess, is less important than the relationship.
No, that's good advice. And then in Boston, you guys have said several times that it's the community factor. And that's really what makes the other big markets work, especially Silicon Valley. There's constant reinvestment from community members back into the community. So tell me what it's been like to build your company around competitors and like-minded founders.
Yeah, the community here is really strong. I think Boston is sort of in a Goldilocks zone as far as its size. It's not too big, not too small. So it's actually possible to network with the vast majority of people and get to know who are the pre-seed investors, who are the seed investors, who are the Series A investors, like who's who, as well as other startups. I talk to other founders in the Boston area all the time to bounce ideas around. Greg, no offense, but to ask impressions on VCs and like, who do you like working with? It's really good to have that network to bounce off of. I think for us, as far as like community resources, there's the people, so other founders and the investors, and then I think there are like third parties, like you're talking to Mass Challenge in a little bit. I think like Mass Challenge, for example, is a program that we went through, which was really helpful. It's obviously named Mass Challenge, it's named after Massachusetts. Brought in 100 different incubation stage startups when we did it in 2019. Very quickly after I left Cisco, I went through Mass Challenge, and it was just like an awesome entry point into meeting not just security companies, but getting a foothold into the whole Boston startup ecosystem.
Founders outside in the smaller markets about relocating their company to a bigger market where there is a community.
Man, that's a tough question. I decided to start a company where I was at, and came to Boston for a very good reason, which was like, it's the perfect place to start a tech career. Honestly, even if you're not going to create a startup someday, it's a really good place. As far as like if you're coming from a smaller market, I'd say if you can make it where you are, cool. I think Boston is always very welcoming, and it's such a right-sized community that is very easy to get here and get to know people fairly quickly and be off and running. I'd say in that my first year after leaving Cisco, which is where I used to be, I found my way to talking to about 100 different chief security officers, and I probably met that year. I think I was measuring my LinkedIn. I left the big company with like 300 LinkedIn connections and ended the year with about 1,000. So it's really easy. Just dive in and start meeting people.
And now, Greg, investors are notorious for wanting to invest in local people or making people move. Is that you? Do you like your investments to move into your area?
No, we don't force it, honestly. And the world is becoming smaller every day, especially with some of the technology out there to allow people to work remotely. That said, we're pretty early stage investors. We typically are leading Series A rounds. When you're starting to build a company, if there is an inside sales motion of any type, it's very helpful to build the culture in a nexus in one place. It doesn't have to be the whole company, but culture building is tough when everyone's remote, or you have to spend the same amount of money to bring them together frequently enough that you'd probably be spending on an office. The one thing that Matt mentioned that Boston is really good is it's the right size city, but if you're starting a company here, when you're hiring folks, there are just a lot of really, really smart people around here. So it's very easy to build a really good core team in the area. And then you can supplement them with remote workers wherever they are if you're looking for the best and brightest. But when you start sales, it's really nice to be close to cities that have early adopters. And for cyber, not to talk too much about cybersecurity, a lot of the early adopters are the banks in New York. The financial services are always been, the early folks trying out the best cyber solutions rather than buying from just the large corporates. So it's nice to be a train ride away and have the ability to hire the right people close by and supplement it. Sure. So not religious about it by any means. We do have companies that are purely remote. I have one that has, I think out of 50 people, they're in 29 states. So they're pretty dispersed. But again, they go through very thoughtfully, how do you bring people together and make them feel like they belong to something, even though that they're not in the same office together.
Absolutely. And that's something that we struggle with at TechCrunch too. We're extremely remote. Everyone works out. I don't know if this is popular knowledge, but we don't have very many people in the Valley anymore. Most people live outside the Valley. Everyone left during COVID. So we struggle with that too. Now we have a question from the audience. And if you want to ask a question too, you can drop it in the chat and hop in. We have people watching that. I was going to ask this question too, but it's really interesting. What Boston companies are you seeing delivering strong spin-outs in reference to like a PayPal mafia? Is there some sort of thing happening in Boston?
Yeah, I'll take that, Matt, a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
So again, I'll be a little cyber specific if that's okay.
Oh, that's great.
Part of this flywheel that's great is that we've got companies that are exiting for nice amounts and spitting out entrepreneurs. So just one example, Matt mentioned we were early investors in Carbon Black. It used to be called Bit9, acquired a company called Carbon Black and changed the name. Carbon Black itself, we've backed 2 companies that have spun out of Carbon Black. I know there are others that have spun out. Obsidian is now on the West Coast. So I'd say there's probably 5 or 6 companies that spun out of Carbon Black alone. Vericode's another one that has a few that have spun out. Cloud Health was another one that we backed. It's one of the beautiful things about an ecosystem, especially when people aren't always leaving, is that
Yes.
Folks that feel success together, either whether it's an early success or something that went public like a Carbon Black, that feeling that they've had as a team that galvanizes them, because they've often gone through tough times as well as having a great exit, it builds something that you can't really kind of put your finger on that allows them to go do their next company with a different kind of scar tissue that seems to catapult them. And we see it through Resilient Systems. There's another one here that has spun out a bunch. Rapid7 has spun a bunch out. Mm-hmm. So there are a bunch, and that's that flywheel I was referring to. To that person's question, HubSpot has now a couple I can think of. Wayfair on the consumer side. I think even Klaviyo is starting to, even though they haven't exited yet. But there's some great companies that are spitting out great entrepreneurs when they're ready to do their own thing.
Tell me about the Angel Network in the Boston area. How active is it, and who's somebody that everyone should know?
Yeah, Matt, feel free if you
take that. Yeah, so I got my pre-seed round done with a good group of angels, a good syndicate, I guess would be the right word, of angels. So not an angel, but awesome pre-seed fund. Drew Volpe over at First Star Ventures led our pre-seed, but then he was joined by people like Sam Clemens, who founded Insight Squared. We had Mike Vistuso, who was one of the founders of Carbon Black. We had Bob Mason, who now has his own VC firm called Argon Ventures. Bob's a great guy, and most people at the pre-seed stage should meet Bob. He was actually my first kind of foray outside of a big company to start dipping my toe into the water of the startup ecosystem. I showed him a pitch deck in like 2018 that was horrible, and he was so nice and gave me lots of great feedback on it. And we've come a long way since then. But yeah, there's a really strong angel ecosystem. There's a lot of people who have seen success here, whether it's in cybersecurity or startups in general, where they're not only willing to maybe invest some money, but also invest their time and their connections and their advice. And I am, to be honest, totally dependent on that, and feel very good about what we've done with the angels that we've brought on board.
Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, I was going to tag on to what Matt said. As any of the founders out there that might be listening, building your network of angels, and you can even call them mentors at the time. That's what Matt did really, really effectively. He just asked for advice. They offered great advice. They often have scar tissue. Some put money in. They're also really well networked for those folks that may not have kind of come to the community with a built-in network. That's where you can really amplify your efforts really, really well. So I think all the angels Matt mentioned are great. I'd say I haven't counted recently, but I believe we have 20 plus institutional angel networks now as well in the area. So there's a lot of folks out there that come together as a group to look at deals together in a specific domain. So you get that great experience of scar tissue in the segment that you're operating. So you beat that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to ask about the universities and the institutions in the area. From an insider's point of view, what are their role in building the startup ecosystem there? Greg?
Yeah, I'll start. I think there are probably 3 aspects. So the first is a lot of the universities here that are deep tech, like an MIT, Harvard's got, Northeastern's got some great stuff. They have labs that they're also often doing tech transfer. They're trying to spin companies out. So if you want to really, really look at companies and technologies that are coming out of good research labs, that's there in spades. If you're a little further down the chain and have started your company and want to start scaling, I already mentioned we've got more STEM grads than anyone in the country, I believe, per capita. I think we graduate almost 40,000 a year, if I recall, in STEM alone.
That's a lot.
So lots of great people to be able to hire. And then we also have very entrepreneurial students. And I really am jealous of this because when I was in school, like, back in the caveman days, being an entrepreneur was not in vogue. If you came out of school and went to an IBM or some other place, otherwise you were too risky and you're probably going to end up living with your parents. So now there are so many entrepreneurship programs combined with venture raising or a certain domain like a cyber that these students are popping up with tech backgrounds, with deep domain, with this spirit that they want to build something right out of school. I think it's just awesome. So I think those are the three aspects I think the universities really contribute.
Matt?
Everything Greg said, one other thing that's a little out there, I love just going to MIT and like sitting in on a lecture, especially if it's an open one, is like the most mind-opening thing, or even like Harvard, if you can get in, it's just a good opportunity to like expand what you're thinking about and see things from a different perspective. And so from like a founder perspective or product management perspective, I spent a lot of time doing that actually when I was still in the kind of finding my path through the jungle phase of the startup. I hadn't, filled my calendar with customer meetings yet because we were still trying to figure out what we were building. And like a lot of that kind of openness in terms of thought is really helpful. And then exactly what Greg said, which is like hiring, having that pool of talent is so, so important. I know one other founder who was like, yeah, when I start companies, I just go hire 10 PhDs from across the river and like, we get started. Whatever comes out is going to be cool. Like, I don't know what's going to be, but like, if you have the right people in the room, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what early stage investors like to hear, right, Greg?
Well, yes and no. I would say the one thing that if there is a downside, and not that there is much here, because obviously I'm a Boston fan, you find really, really smart people sometimes building things and hoping to find the problem they may solve. And obviously, when you're building a company, you have to focus on the value it's providing the customer and solving a business problem. So occasionally we'll see the tech transfer. It's more a really cool hammer without a nail yet. But the really smart people figure out which nail to go after first, and they just keep knocking them down.
Yeah. Now, Greg, I have a question from the audience for you. David Walsh asks, be interested to hear how a VC like 406 can help a startup transition from technology proof to broader commercialization.
Great question. We can spend a lot of time on this. I'll try to be brief. So one of the things we aim in my firm, many of us were operators before we became investors. So we came to 406 with a bunch of scar tissue of trying to build our own stuff or manage our own teams. So we're very intent on when we invest in a company, if we don't think we can add value beyond capital, we typically don't engage. It's kind of where our name 406 came from and how Ted Williams got to that batting average. He let a lot of strikes go by that he didn't swing at because they weren't in his hot zone. So we try to invest only in companies that we think we can make a difference. Some of that value add that I think David's asking about is we come with a network ourselves. So oftentimes we're helping our companies hire, especially early stage. They've got a few holes in the management team. We want to help them fill those holes with not only people we know, but we also use a lot of people from our portfolio that have had exits and have had success and that scar tissue. They're great hires to bring in because they're accelerating your trajectory. And then we also have a pretty good network of service providers, Keiretsu around the portfolio. We don't invest in competitive companies, so a lot of them use each other's products. And we also share, so at the CEO level, we'll bring CEOs together for a summit to compare notes within cyber. We've got a bunch just in that domain. They can kind of compare notes on how they're building, what struggles they're having, and then they have each other to lean on over time. And we do that for CEOs, CTOs, CFOs, CMOs. So we try to leverage the 70 some odd companies in our portfolio to help each other. And then personally, we try to bring the right scar tissue that we might be able to bear to our companies to give them outsized advantage. And the last thing, I apologize, we have pretty large councils of experts in each of our areas. So in mine and Matt's case, we've got a council of about 45 chief information security officers. They look at deals with us, which is obviously ground truth, and that's incredibly helpful to my team. But they also become advisors of our companies. Some become investors, some become board members, and they often drive the first $1 million or $2 of ARR because they're CISOs of big companies typically. So we try to give our companies a bit of a head start from the revenue standpoint, team building, and then just all the scar tissue that we have from the companies as well as our own experiences to help them avoid the mistakes we made, frankly.
That was a good sales pitch. I like that. What's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
There's a lot. My email is gdracon or greg@46ventures.com. Anyone can reach out. It's right on our website. Love to meet more folks out there. So feel free.
I'm Matt, M-A-T-T, at oort.io, or just go to oort.io, oort.io, and schedule a demo. Happy to show you the product. Get in touch.
Fantastic. One last question. This comes from the audience, and it's a fantastic question. People would love to hear the reflections on how Boston is fostering investors, next generation investors and founders, particularly from diverse backgrounds. Greg, can we start with you?
Sure. And investors are two very different things, obviously. So on one regard, we've done a terrible job pushing diversity in this region over time. So we're doing a lot more in that regard and focusing on it a lot more. And I mean that as a community, not my firm or anyone specific. So I think there's a focus there, and we need to continue to focus on it. On the founder side, it also goes a little back to some of the education in the schools. We want to continue to collaborate with these universities and make sure we're finding people when they're coming out to help them get off the ground before they take a different path. So find the budding entrepreneur, give them some success early, and I think that success breeds success. So I think on the founder side, we can engage more with the universities. On the investor side, we just need more folks to be interested in this side of the world and come, in my case, with some operational experience, go try to start something. Even if you've failed, to me, that's almost more valuable than early success. So go out, try something that is in and around our ecosystem, and then talk to different VCs out there and see if you want to move to this side of the table, or go build something, have a great success, and then you can start your own firm or join a firm that backed you. You
like that scar tissue?
Love the scar tissue.
That's good. I like to hear that. And Matt, tell me what it's like to hire diverse technical talent.
Yeah, and to answer, well, I'll answer two questions. Both the one that you answered, Greg, asked of Greg, which is like, I see the best way to create, a more diverse base of founders is by hiring them in-house in an early stage company like us. Because most founders, successful ones, I don't recommend going the route that I went, which is like never working for a startup, only working for a Fortune 500, and then starting a company. I think it would have been much easier to go work for a startup first and then start one. So I highly recommend that path. And so when I'm building my executive team, I think a lot about diversity and I really care about it. And then you also asked about technical talent. I think technical talent comes from all over the world. For us, we have people from 4 different continents working on our product from a technical perspective. Yes, the center of gravity is in Boston, but we really find people from all walks of life and all different cultures. We were just talking about this morning on our all hands about how important and core that is to our mission and our culture and our values at Oort. Just keeping that close, as you're building your company, I think will just really reinforce and create a positive feedback loop in the Boston ecosystem.
That's a great answer. And we're out of time, but I guess one last thing, I've been wondering this in the entire interview. Matt, what the hell does Oort mean?
I get that question all the time. So Oort is named after the Oort cloud, which is this ring or sphere of comets orbiting the outside edge of the solar system. You can think about that like any enterprise being orbited by a swirling mass of identities, employees, contractors, third parties. That's Oort. It's like, it's huge, it's out there, and we're going to discover it together.
That's an extremely nerdy name, and I would expect nothing less from a Boston startup.
It's on brand.
Yeah, it is. Greg, Matt, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for participating in our city spotlight of Boston. It's been a thrill. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for having us, Matt.
Yeah. And next up, I hope you stick around for the next interview. We have Mark Raybert coming up. He's the founder of Boston Dynamics. And then he's also leading the new Hyundai AI Institute, co-partnered with Boston Dynamics. There's some relationship. I don't really know, but Brian is going to explain in the next segment. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Brian Heater. I am TechCrunch's hardware editor. I am very pleased to be joined once again. It's actually been a few years by Mark Raybert. Since its foundation in the early 90s, Boston Dynamics has become one of the world's foremost robotics developers and researchers. Mark, the founder, stepped down from the CEO role in 2019 and currently serves as the company's chairman. Last year, he became the executive chairman of Boston Dynamics AI Institute, a Hyundai-sponsored organization focused on developing cutting-edge AI and robotics applications. Mark, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Good to see you, Brian.
So we're here to talk about the Institute. We're here to talk about robotics. We're here to talk about Boston. I think it's at the top of our list. So let's kick off with that. I realize the name of the company limits your geographic options a little bit, but was it clear from the earliest days that Boston Dynamics was always going to stay in the Boston area?
Well, I'm kind of a lifelong Boston person. I grew up in New Jersey, but my mother grew up here. So I had a connection to Boston, from a very early age. And I love Boston. I went to school here, left for 10 years. And then, eventually was faculty at MIT. I was a professor there for 10 years before starting Boston Dynamics. And, when we started, it was halftime Boston Dynamics, halftime MIT. So we started just next door. So it wasn't really motivated by Boston being a hub of robotics. It was just, where I was and where I was comfortable. And so we started here. We did open a California office. We have a California office now. Boston Dynamics does, not the Institute.
That was a result of an acquisition.
Not really. It was after we were out of Google. Yes, it was a result of our acquisition of Kinema, which was in Palo Alto, I think, when we first got them, and then we opened an office in Mountain View, which is still there. But Boston is home, is the basic answer.
I actually didn't know you left for 10 years. What did you do in the meantime?
3 years at the Jet Propulsion Lab back in the 1970s. And then 6 years at Carnegie Mellon on the faculty in both the Robotics Institute and the Computer Science Department.
Well, the second part makes a lot of sense, but were there a lot of robotic applications for JPL at the time?
It was fledgling, but they had a mock-up of a Mars rover back in the 70s. Now, it looked like a car, and it had, I don't know if you remember the old Stanford arms, the ones that had a sliding joint. So it had one of those on, and it had some cameras. And then there were a couple of different groups working on it. But in addition to that, Tony Bakesy, who was a researcher in telerobotics, he had a lab. So I split my time between Tony's lab and that Mars rover group. This was my first job after grad school.
So you did make that move to the other side of the country initially. And I've heard a lot of people talk about the brain drain that cities like Pittsburgh or Boston have undergone. How large of a problem was that exodus to places like San Francisco or New York in the early days?
You mean of talent?
Yeah.
I don't think we've lost too many people to the West Coast, but sometimes that happens. When we were part of Google, there was a group of us from Boston Dynamics who moved out to the West Coast. And I think those people mostly stayed. And when we got out of Google, they didn't come back with us. But Boston has its own charms and attraction, and there's lots of tech here, lots of schools doing good stuff. There's MIT, Northeastern has an incredible robotics activity going. When you come in April, you should try and visit over there. It's very impressive. Yeah. Worcester Polytech has a group. There's Holly Yenko at I'm blocking on the University of Massachusetts. Yeah. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, Yale Harvard with the Weiss Lab. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So when you have these conversations, and obviously, with the Institute being in play now, I assume you're looking at a lot of, recent or soon to be grads from schools like MIT. What's your pitch for roboticists and why they should stay in Boston?
Mostly we just focus on what the Institute's doing and the work. I don't think it comes up explicitly as a geography thing. Mostly it's about what's the work going to be, how committed are we to research as opposed to product development. And, that's the lever or the decision that most people make. Do they want to be working on a company that's developing a product? And, there's some advantages of that for some people. And then our long suit is that we're working on, 5 to 8 to 10-year horizon where we can work on problems where you can really dig in on the technical issues and do that. And there are a lot of people that love that idea.
So how dramatically has Boston and the Boston ecosystem changed in the 30 plus years since the company was founded?
Well, these days, I don't even know how many startups there are in the area. There's all the logistics companies. There must be a dozen of them, which all have robotics talent at them. There's the social robot activity, Cynthia Brazil's company and others like that. And, new things are springing up all the time. The pizza company, I can't remember exactly the name, that was here. But, to be honest, I think more globally. I'm always thinking of us being an international company. And, now that we meaning Boston Dynamics, have spot robots all around the world. There's about 1,000 of them out there now. It's not just all about Boston.
Sure. Yeah. But obviously there are certain benefits in terms of infrastructure when it comes to running an institute full of roboticists and AI researchers.
Right. Well, the recruiting here is great. There's Amazon that's got robotics people. Google is right across the street. They don't exactly have robotics in Boston, but obviously they have a lot of talent in AI and software. So those are potential employees. And there's a lot of technical people, but we recruit all across the country and somewhat from Europe. So we've been getting applicants from all over.
Yeah, obviously the conversation is different when you're trying to attract somebody to your company versus a student at a place like MIT or Harvard that's looking to found their own startup. Insofar as you're aware of it, that as a former faculty member at places like MIT and CMU, are schools like that doing enough to help students found startups?
Well, when I started Boston Dynamics, one of the key events was the MIT hired a technology license office person who had been at Stanford. Stanford at that time, this was 30 something years ago, was ahead on the curve of stimulating spin-outs and startups. And this guy they hired him at MIT. And I can remember going into a meeting where I was totally skeptical that my future could possibly involve leaving MIT and starting a company. And in a 1-hour meeting, he changed my mind, mostly because he said, if the people who did the invention aren't bought in and excited about the company, it doesn't have a chance of success. And so the whole program that they had at MIT was designed to motivate and inspire and really support the founders. And when I just expected that MIT would be, hugging the IP like this, and instead they were saying, take it as far as you can. And I think that's different than some schools. We've negotiated. We, being a company, have tried to get IP from some universities, and they're really holding it close with very restrictive terms and all that. And it's discouraging when you get in that situation. But anyway, so that was I can't remember your question, but one thing that happened was MIT encouraged that.
Yeah. It was, explicitly about sort of like incubating and accelerating startups. But it's interesting to hear that it sounds like they were also ahead of the curve by a couple of decades.
Yeah. And that really made some things happen. There were also other activities like the 50K activity at MIT, where someone had every year they would fund startups based on evaluating their business plans. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is there's Olin College. I don't know if you know Olin, but it's another area college. It's a very interesting college because everybody's tuition is paid for by the school. So that's kind of an equalizing thing. But they have a very strong development of entrepreneurial spirit. And we've had a number of interns at Boston Dynamics from there, and they were always gunning to start their own company. That was their plan. So I think it's been a force here in the Boston area as well. So
obviously your wardrobe hasn't changed since you left the CEO role at Boston Dynamics, but how has your day-to-day changed since leaving? Well,
when there was a point at Boston Dynamics where we were clearly turning more commercial, and I decided that I wasn't the right guy to do that. I'd also heard a talk by, unfortunately, I can't remember his first name. His last name is Blankenfein, who was the chairman of
is it Lance?
Either JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, one of those places. And he gave a talk about his decision to step down. And he said, you really need to step down when things are going great. If you step down when things are in trouble, then they think you're a bum and they kick you out. But if you do it when it's going great, it's hard because things are so much fun. But that's when you have to do it. So I listened to that and decided he was right. And that plus the fact that we were turning to commercialization. So I became the chairman and appointed, Rob Plater had been my right-hand man. He'd been my graduate student at MIT, been with me for 30 years, almost 30 years at that point, 27. So he became the CEO. And I didn't have enough to do, to be honest. And then COVID came. So, everybody is even withdrawn further. And so it was kind of sleepy and slow. And, I thought about retiring. I'm old enough to retire. And then
you're certainly dressed for retirement.
Well, I've always been dressed for retirement. That's one of the things about this life. It's fun and work at the same time. What could be better than that? But then when Hyundai agreed to fund the Institute, I decided I needed to be here every day to work and to inspire the others. And it's been great. It's just like being back in it full bore. So I've been loving it, been working hard, and I couldn't be happier.
How much of that push towards commercialization or push towards productization was a result of the Hyundai acquisition?
It really started, I think the tip of it came when we were still at Google. But then SoftBank, we were with SoftBank for 4 years, I think. And the first 2 years, it was just all about the future. And then, it got to be more about what the products were and, tightening up the bottom line and that kind of stuff. And when we got there, we turned. But I think another force is that Rob Plater has always wanted to commercialize. I'm a research guy. I really want to work on the long term and, make the next generation or the generation after that happen of robots. But Rob is really, interested and committed to the commercialization side. I think you might have seen, I think there was a Boston Globe article that said the company was all about making money now. So I think it's been a great, a great path where I'm going on the path I like, and the company is continuing, to do great work, including research, as you can all see.
Yeah, obviously it's good to have a company that is self-sustaining and that can generate its own money.
Yeah.
So was the AI Institute, was that part of the Hyundai deal from the beginning?
No. So the origin of the Institute is after I became chairman and started to get bored, I wrote a proposal that I actually shopped around to a few billionaires and got someone to to agree at a level that wasn't enough, in my opinion. Then COVID happened, so I couldn't, go and visit people as easily. So I kind of slowed down. But then after the Hyundai deal happened, it was all done. I pitched it internally, and they went for it, and and here we are.
So beyond the obvious contribution of $400 million from the start, what is Hyundai's relationship to the Institute?
Well, they are, they're the only stockholder in the current arrangement. It's been very collaborative. There's some managers involved, but I also talk to the chairman on a regular basis of Hyundai. He's a real enthusiast. He's really, leaning into the future where software, AI, and other high-tech things, EVs, are, central to Hyundai, to HMG. And, we're just a part of that leaning in process, both Boston Dynamics and the AI Institute.
Is Pure Research, is that a hard thing to sell to a giant multinational automaker?
It's only a year. It's actually, the Institute's only been around since last summer, although it's been in the works for over a year. You never know until later what the staying power is. Right now, my pitch is to avoid products, because products force you into quarterly and annual work. Products force you into all the various needs of all the various customers. And, they have a lot of good information, but they also take you in lots of directions. And if you want to, do the vision of what's going to come next, I think it has to come from the technical people who are developing it. And so the Institute, right, I proudly say we're not doing products. If downstream, does Hyundai get bored with that? I don't know, but this is what we're doing. And basically, no one's trying to steer me at the moment.
This philosophy of avoiding products, was that part of Boston Dynamics' mission statement at the beginning?
Boston Dynamics, no.
Okay.
No, and we had products. We had some software products in the very early days that we actually made money on. In the early days, we were always in the black because we didn't have any investors up until Google acquired us 20 something years in. So we always had to be making money. A lot of it was contract work, but we also had some software products, not robot products, but software products. But no, we didn't say we're not going to do products or we're not going to make money in those days.
So aside from sharing a name, what is the Institute's relationship with Boston Dynamics?
We're just friendly, but we don't have any IP from Boston Dynamics. It's really just sharing the name at the moment. And of course, and I'm on the board there. We haven't been recruiting from there, although we have a few people, most of whom either left on their own or something like that. And of course, Al Rizzi, who's the longtime chief scientist there, is the CTO at the Institute. We came together to it. So we're just loosely connected.
So if productization and commercialization aren't focuses for the Institute, what happens with the IP and the patents and the other things that are developed in the Institute?
We have a multi-pronged plan. We can do spin-outs, which it's interesting. Spin-outs by some are seen as a way to commercialize. For me, it's a way to protect the Institute from productization, from products.
just sort of push them out and let them do their own thing away from the.
That's right, because we have really smart people who are inventing stuff, and that they're going to be good product ideas, and so we expect to spin them out, maybe incubate them a little bit if that's what they need. There's also licensing possibly to Boston Dynamics, possibly to Hyundai or third parties. we're nowhere near that yet. We're
Yeah.
only a few months in, so we don't have any real IP at this point. We just have talent at this point.
Sure, but I assume these are conversations that happen early on.
Right.
But it sounds like there's no foregone conclusion that anything that's developed by the Institute is going to end up at Boston Dynamics or Hyundai.
No, that's right.
So, we discussed the difference between the work being done at Boston Dynamics, which, as you said, is doing research, but now is also very much focused on bringing products to market. But how does the Institute's research differ from the work at universities like MIT or CMU?
Well, first of all, let me talk about the structure. Let's see. First, let me talk about the difference with Boston Dynamics. I think there's two main differences. One is we're aimed 5 to 8 to even 10 years out. And I think most of the work at Boston Dynamics is aimed at, what's the next product? Well, satisfying the current set of customers. What's the next product going to be? And developing on a shorter time frame as you need to if you're commercializing and making product. The other difference is Boston Dynamics is pretty squarely focused on the physicality of the robot, including the ability to create behavior that responds with its environment, but less so on the AI side of things. How do you communicate with the robot? How do you make robots that can plan things? Basically, all robots today are about as dumb as doorknobs. And people see a robot doing parkour and backflips, and they think that's just like a person. But in almost every other dimension, It's not anything like a person. You can't communicate with it. It can't write its own programs. Its perception is usually limited to the things right around it and its environment.
And one of the things I appreciate that Boston Dynamics has done that I feel like more companies should do is release the longer cut, release the bloopers, release like all of the difficulties and the trial and error that went into making those beautiful parkour videos.
Well, back when I was just an early professor in the early 80s, I made a robot that balanced itself, a one-legged pogo stick robot. And I showed that and no one cared. And then I showed one where I showed it falling over, how quickly and easily it tips over. And then all of a sudden everybody appreciated, that was hard. That was interesting. So the bloopers are a great tool for making people see the accomplishment in a bigger light. It also shows the frailties, but it also strengthens the accomplishments. So I agree.
So, again, we discussed a little bit of the differences between Boston Dynamics, the company, and Boston Dynamics, the Institute, but obviously there's so much great work being done in universities right now. What opportunities are you afforded at the Institute that they don't necessarily have at those schools?
Well, I think in the Institute, you have a university which is full of smart people with blue sky, ambitious goals to do new, novel things. And then you have a corporate lab, which has teamwork. They have support from hardware, software, sensor, electronic engineering. And they have schedule and budget discipline. And I think of the Institute as being right in the middle, having larger scale teamwork. We plan to have about 50 people in engineering that supports the work of the researchers, in addition to other engineering people in the research groups, while we're trying to maintain that, future, how to make the future happen and solve really the fundamental problems in robotics, not just the feature that is needed right now, but how do you really make robots smarter so that they understand the world they're operating in? So you can say, see that guy over there, what he's doing? Do that instead of having a dozen programmers work for a month to get that program. So that's what we're trying to do. And I think the scale of having those teams is really going to be important. So you asked what that's going to let us do. I think we'll be able to, obviously ChatGPT is all the rage. And I don't think ChatGPT is the right thing for many of the tasks that robots do. But the idea of a foundation model tuned to the functionality of what robots need to do in terms of their perception, communication, planning, I think that's a real possibility. But to do that, you have to work at a larger scale than most university research labs can do. Also, to build hardware, I think part of Boston Dynamics' success is that they invested in the team that can build really high performance and reliable hardware. We're gonna do that too, because I think you need to have the software and the hardware working like this in order to succeed in this business.
So the concept of a multi-purpose humanoid robot comes around every few years. You've been involved in one of the more notable examples, the Atlas robot. Does that bipedal form factor ultimately make a lot of sense?
I don't know. Elon thinks so. That's interesting. I would rather point at Spot as a general purpose robot, just because, we designed it without a particular application in mind. It's a platform where you can customize it for your use. We have 1,000 of them out there, which are being used in a reasonably diverse set of environments. And so, we're finding out how well that works. Can you amortize the technical investment in the platform and have it really pay off for a wide variety of use cases? At the Institute, we're in a planning phase where we have a list of projects that we're contemplating doing, and we're getting all our talented people to say things about what they'd like to do, and getting the balance between trying to have robots that do everything and robots that do one thing is, a hot topic for us. And we're probably going to pick a couple of activities that span that space and, see how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are a lot of stops on the path to a real general purpose robot. But I have to ask, you brought it up. What were your thoughts on the Tesla Optimus demo?
I thought that they'd gotten a lot more done than I expected, and they still have a long way to go. I thought that their design was interesting. That cosmetic, the second robot that wasn't really working but was on stage. I mean, cosmetically, it was very interesting. And I'm a Tesla driver. I've had a couple of them. I really admire Elon. Despite the recent Twitter activity, I think he's a brilliant guy, and I absolutely wouldn't count him out.
And we've only got about a minute left, and I have to ask you, why was it important that the company signed the Weaponized Robotics Pledge?
I think that there was a lot of sentiment among the employees that we should, be good about the robots. The robots aren't suitable for weaponizing. There's so many additional concerns if a robot were to be weaponized, and we just wanted to say, we shouldn't be doing it with ease. I think there was some unhappiness that it looked like some of the other companies had just kind of flung a weapon on there without maybe necessarily considering all the safety things. I mean, as much as anything, it's a friendly fire type worry, if you have something that's not doing what it's supposed to do.
Great. Unfortunately, we are all out of time. Mark, I appreciate it as always, and hopefully I will see you in a few weeks in Boston.
Great. Good talking to you. Take it easy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ron Miller. I write about the enterprise for TechCrunch. And this afternoon, I'm interviewing Kate Brumme, who is CEO at Mass Challenge, a Boston-based zero-equity incubator that helps startups launch, gives them space or build space, equity for a little bit of equity for with no expectations of return, and introduces them to the right people in the community to help them survive and thrive as a business and get off the ground. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Ron, for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're here to discuss why Boston is a great place to launch a startup. And obviously that's something that you have expertise in, given, your company and what you do. I wanted to start off talking about the universities and colleges that kind of act as a driver to, the startup community in Boston. There's Harvard, there's MIT, there's Northeastern, there's UMass, there's Tufts. There's a lot of world-class colleges and universities all in the metro Boston area. And I'm wondering why you think that helps drive this Boston startup system that we have.
Sure. Yeah, Ron, I think you dove right into one of the often cited highlights of the Boston startup ecosystem, and it supports our unique environment in a couple different ways. One is Babson, Harvard, MIT, Tufts each spin out incredible companies each year, from undergrad, from graduate, from their PhD program, directly feeding into our ecosystem. And second, they support incredible talent and talent density in our area, so that companies who are looking for full-time interns, what have you, have sort of direct access to this incredible pool of talent. And I think those two powers combined, much less the incredible research that's happening in labs, make our university system a really unique and potent contributor to our startup community here.
How closely does your firm work with, the different university and college incubators? Because there's so many of them.
For sure. I mean, as closely as you can. As you mentioned, Mass Challenge, we like to think of ourselves as a global network of innovators. We're headquartered in Boston. We have 13 years of working with high impact, high potential companies, helping them launch and grow for no equity at no cost. That model makes us a really friendly first home for many founders who are coming out of labs into first commercialization, and or for students who are looking to enter into the world with their startup baby. So we have formal relationships in place with many of the university systems that enable students to move seamlessly from their university support system, for example, to Mass Challenge, and informal relationships with as many as we can.
I've talked to startup founders who came out of the college system in the Boston area. And when you talk to PhDs, especially ones who are doing lab work, one of the things they've said to me is that once their PhD is over, they have lost access to all this very expensive equipment that they often need to use to do their experiments and to kind of create the things that will drive their business creation. How does having that kind of post-graduate system of labs and workspaces help kind of drive the ecosystem?
Oh, sure. I mean, for sure, coming from a university system where you have not only access to lab equipment, but a robust community, maybe free food, the whole shebang. I mean, that's a cushy life. And then you enter the real world. At Mass Challenge, we provide space for our founders and, in fact, for the broader community, and are very focused also on providing a community of innovators around them. And we work in close concert with an amazing array of partners across the Massachusetts ecosystem that provide access to lab space, equipment, testing facilities. So Mass Robotics is the world's largest incubator for robotic companies, Greentown Labs, the largest now for climate and clean tech. You have Forge, who specifically supports hardware companies, Lab Central in life science. And so our powers combined, if you would, provide a really unique support system for founders, from community through to equipment.
So, I was thinking about it before I got on this call, and some pretty famous, founders started in Boston, but then didn't stay here. You think of Bill Gates moving Microsoft to Seattle, or Mark Zuckerberg moving Facebook to Palo Alto. when I'm a startup founder and I come out of these Boston schools, there are a lot of different places I could go to. I could go to Miami, it's great weather. I could go to New York, it's got, the glitz and the glamour, and it's got Fortune 500 companies at my doorstep. Or I could go, out to San Francisco like Zuckerberg did, because, it's the startup center. It's considered like the kind of tour de force of startups, right? So why should I stay in Boston? Why should I launch my startup here? What does Boston have to offer that would be, make me want to stay here and start a business?
Yeah, that's great. And certainly highlighting the ones that got away make us super reflective also of like our journey and what we do well and what we don't do as well. Because I think, all ecosystems are unique. A couple of things that we always highlight and that founders highlight back to us. First is Boston is a very dense ecosystem, which makes it easy to navigate, a lot of cross-pollination of talent and companies and even investment firms, which is very attractive to many companies. Second, highly collaborative. I think this comes from, in many ways, our DNA and sort of problem solving first, company building second. And so you find an ecosystem that's welcoming, as I mentioned, collaborative, and really focused on supporting founders that are working on hard problems. Third is talent. We started with the university systems as sort of one great example, but talent coming out of companies that are that much farther ahead, also extremely valuable for companies that are just getting started and or scaling up. And the last is, we may not be quite as large in absolute dollars as Silicon Valley. We have a high density of venture capital, and particularly venture capital with deep expertise and specialization in certain areas that are very attractive to our startup founders. And so, collectively, it makes MassChallenge a really unique home, particularly for founders that are working on complex problems, with our DNA and life science and enterprise technology, growing in robotics, advanced materials. We're, a really unique home for many founders in those areas.
So, we talked about the universities, but Boston has, in the Boston area, has more than that, right? It has world-class hospitals. It's got financial services. Fidelity is based here, and other financial services companies. There's insurance. There's a lot of different types of companies. How do those kind of established companies, work with you and work with venture capitalists and others in the area and the universities to kind of, in tandem, like you talked about the collaborative stuff, how do they all work together to help startups build their companies here?
For sure. And I'll also highlight, we have industry, but also public sector partners who are very engaged in innovation, have a long history of supporting even startup-led innovation. So whether it's MITRE or Draper or Lincoln Laboratories, deep expertise and unique technology development through to commercialization. And so we I think that health tech, fintech, dual use, safety and security are three great examples of where Boston is, we think, really in the lead at leveraging our industry and corporate landscape to help startups both do faster customer discovery or research, pilot and co-create opportunities, and then ideally get to scale. At MassChallenge, we in fact launched our fintech and our digital health practice almost 5 or 6 years ago now, with support from the private sector and the public sector who wanted to see Massachusetts better support nascent companies in these really critical categories, leverage the best of our legacy industries to get to market faster. And so our digital health, our fintech programs are designed to do exactly that, match small startup companies with incumbents like MassMutual, like Citizens, who have interest in being close to innovators and are willing to help them, pilot, test, and scale where it works.
Yeah, so how does that work in practice? I mean, I'm a startup founder. I have this idea that maybe can help, like a Citizens or a Fidelity or, one of the hospitals become, more modern, or give them an edge that maybe they wouldn't have on their own as a, kind of an incumbent player. How does all that work together? And how do they not suffocate the startups? Because sometimes working with large companies, you can have this, like huge entity kind of taking over the development and, pushing them in directions maybe that isn't, widely commercial or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard it really well described as a startup is like an acorn under a big oak tree. And with the proper love, care, sunlight, it'll grow, and hopefully one day be as compelling. But the risk is that in the meantime, it gets squashed by the roots, doesn't get sun, et cetera. And so I'll highlight a couple of things about the way the industry works, and then maybe how Mass Challenge is engaged within Boston to try and make it even more effective. We're lucky in Boston that many of these large teams have their scouting or R&D functions based in Boston, and their mandate is to go out into the world knowing the problems that say Children's Hospital or Mass Mutual is trying to solve, and identify early stage companies that could be compelling fits against these either short-term or longer-term challenges, and then provide more of a safe haven for early validation and testing and piloting to see if there is a strong mutually beneficial fit before moving them into a deployment phase. What we know at Mass Challenge is that's easier said than done. It's actually really challenging for early stage companies to know what challenges or problem sets these big companies have. It's really hard to find the right person inside to navigate procurement, and then to move from pilot to scale up. And so, with the co-creation of our corporate partners, we've built a program that's intended to help megaphone out to the world what are the challenges that these companies face, so that startups can match to those challenges. And then we have the architecture to help them mutually determine whether there's a good fit, and then if so, move forward. But as you say, it's hard work, and it requires both parties to adapt in ways that feel less natural.
How does your own network, your own network of companies that have come through the Mass Challenge incubator, help in that regard? Because they can probably direct founders and guide them in ways that, based on their experience, how they were able to kind of make that work.
Sure. And I'll speak about Mass Challenge, but I'll say that I think our example is also what makes Boston great, because we have many, many founders who have gone through various stages and are willing to turn around and give back of their time, their expertise, and in many cases, their own capital to support the generation of founders behind them. And so certainly at Mass Challenge, the best scenario for us are when alumni who've gone through the programs are willing to and do in fact come back to speak, provide their experience to other founders. We have an increasing number of alumni who actively mentor and coach our startups. And then also to help them break open doors, whether it's with new customers or other partners, et cetera. And so you're absolutely right. That sort of collaborative give back ethos that we inspire to instill in our partners is important and part of the Boston ecosystem too.
As I was preparing for this, I looked at some PitchBook data about the growth of Boston's venture capital investment, and it's really exploded, in recent years. It went from, I think, 17 billion in 2020 to 34 billion in 21, before dropping off a bit in 22, and I think everybody everywhere dropped off. But how does this venture capital system that's been really, growing and developing over the last 20 or 30 years in Boston, how does that help, these companies as they kind of come out of your, space, kind of safe space, and get out in the world, and they need more money to go to market?
Yeah, so we're excited to see not only that Boston has sort of grown with the growth of the venture capital space, but in many areas has outpaced the growth of venture capital elsewhere. And particularly, I think we see a couple exciting areas. Life science has always been sort of a really large life science and biotech large part, but we see a large number of firms, growing firms in the early stage space, which we cheer on. We know that Boston has a legacy of angel investors, but more in the pre-seed seed space are hugely beneficial to supporting a really healthy pipeline, in addition to specialized funds in digital health, bioconvergence, artificial intelligence, as well over time. And so certainly what we know from our founders is that they want to raise capital in Boston and build teams in Boston. And so the growth of venture capital here enables that, compared to feeling like you have to go to Silicon Valley.
So you talked about the angel investment system, and I think, that's something that has happened over the last, 20 or 30 years as companies have developed and, gone public or been acquired and created this wealth among startup founders. And you see it with Wayfair, you see it with HubSpot. Carbon Black got acquired for $1 billion or $1.2 billion, Acquia for $1 billion. So there's been some big exits. There's been some big IPOs. How does that kind of help, drive what you're trying to do at your firm, as well as, the system at large?
For sure. So one is, we are extremely fortunate that some of those individuals give back to organizations like ours. We're a nonprofit, and so we have to say thank you always for that support. But more importantly, for the ecosystem, I think we see one is a deep commitment by individuals who have had entrepreneurial success, often to give back, both with their capital and of their time, and that absolutely creates positive ripple effects to the vibrancy and the growth of an ecosystem. And you also see that in the spin out of talent, and that may be talented individuals, executives who similarly share to the upside, and so are giving back of their time and treasures, but often are choosing to then go on to found additional companies within the ecosystem, et cetera. So we think that sort of spawning of positive seeds is something that is super healthy, is visible in Boston, and is something that we hope we'll see even more of.
So you talked about life sciences as a strength of Boston, and it certainly is. Boston and Cambridge have their share of biotech companies. Moderna, of course, became famous because of its ability to come up with a COVID vaccine so quickly after the pandemic started. What other areas, what other strengths, what other kinds of startups are, best suited to the Boston area?
Sure. So, life science, biotech, obviously a legacy strength and continues to be a leading category for Boston, in addition to sort of some of the infrastructure and enterprise technology. While Boston is not often as recognized for this compared to Silicon Valley, many of our top performing companies also are in the consumer and fintech categories as well. And those are both areas where we see significant opportunity. We're really excited about a couple emerging categories. One is, I mentioned robotics and climate. These are areas we think play to Boston's strength, being often based in really technical solutions or inventions that are focused on big problems. And I think that's enabled by organizations not just like Mass Challenge, but Greentown, Mass Robotics, The Engine, to name just a few. The state has put significant emphasis around digital health and fintech, and we've seen growth of companies in both of those categories. And we think we'll continue to see those, given also, as you mentioned, the incredible legacy institutions here who are committed not only to their own advancement, but to supporting innovation here in Massachusetts. And Mass Challenge, we've been active in the dual use space. It's an area we're excited about. These are companies that have both commercial and government use, and with MIT and Draper Labs and MITRE, to name just a few, in addition to the UMass system, we're seeing a really exciting growth of companies in this category as well.
So when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that kind of I thought was interesting and exciting is you talked about bioconvergence, which is like combining computer science and biology. Can you talk a little bit about that and who's doing that?
Sure. So this is certainly within the university systems. I think we see intentional investment in departments coming together. So bringing those in the computer science and those in, say, the biology space, coming together to think about how can we solve problems with those powers combined. And it's an area that we think is still emerging. Obviously, you have more complexity when you're looking at both solutions that touch both biology and computer science, but we think could be really powerful and really exciting. And also sort of deeply connected to other areas of expertise around the world. We're active in Israel, and this is an area of focus there as well.
So we only have a few minutes left. So I wanted to talk to you about kind of the challenging environment that we've been in for the last several years. I mean, starting with the pandemic lockdown, and then, I mean, we had a little bit of a rise in 21, but then we had the economic challenges that we're seeing in 22 and 23. How has that impacted the startup environment? And how do startups kind of navigate, and how do you work with startups to navigate these kind of challenging times that we've found ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, it has been an extraordinary couple of years. And certainly as you think about the stress and the challenges that founders face, all the more so when you're building a company in within the environment of COVID, and you can't actually get in front of customers the way you've been trained to. Or today when there's a major pullback in funding after 10 years of extraordinary capital flow. So this is a challenging time. I'll answer it optimistically though, which is entrepreneurs are extremely resilient beings. They see problems, they persevere with incredible ambition and optimism, and are willing and trained and ready to pivot through challenges. And so I think what we've seen, even in these extraordinary times, is entrepreneurs rise to the occasion. Whether that was the acceleration of digital health solutions during COVID, where there was finally an opening and an openness to virtual care and treatment, for example, or whether that is in the response today around the potential of artificial intelligence to accelerate solutions into the field. So it's a hard environment for fundraising. That is definitively the case. But what we know is from past recessions that some of the best companies come out of the hardest times. So we expect to see an amazing next generation of companies come through in the next couple of years.
So a lot of folks have actually never lived through a downturn, right? I mean, you know, as certainly as, you know, adults running a business, you know, it's been since 2008. You know, we've had a pretty good run. So like when you talk to especially young startup founders who haven't experienced this kind of environment, like what kind of advice are they looking for, having not been through this? And I mean, obviously they have to be resilient or they don't survive, right? Yeah. But you know, they're trying to navigate something that is foreign to them, and I'm wondering how you talk to them about that.
Yeah, I think there are two simple points. One is it can get worse than you expect. And so as you plan your downside, have a broader continuum. It will allow you to plan more resiliently and encourage you to make harder decisions than if you think you can speedboat your way through. And that's certainly, I was a stock analyst in 2008, and let's just say the downside scenarios were not the downside scenarios. And so I think that comes from my personal learnings there. But as we think about how do companies extend their runway, get to profitability, right size hiring patterns, it's really important that they reflect on what the full potential is. And the second is to take care of yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. The company is dependent. Often it's the smaller the company is, the even more dependent they are on the founder. And it's really important to take care of your mental health as a founder when the stresses of the outside are so extraordinary, in addition to the stresses of building a company, even under the best of circumstances.
All right, well, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so much for coming in and talking to us this afternoon about why Boston is a great place to launch a startup. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, for letting us make the case. This was fun.
Hello, and welcome to the City Spotlight Boston Pitch Up competition. I'm your dastardly host, Haya, and I'm here with a couple of legends of the Boston investing scene as judges. Wave a virtual hello to Payal from Point 406 Ventures and Dan from Clean Energy Ventures. We have three very fun companies pitching. We have Piction Health, Useful, and Penny Finance, all based in or around Boston, all vying for our top prize. Our two judges are going to be evaluating the companies using the same criteria that we use for our Startup Battlefield competition. The companies needs to have both a potential for social impact, financial success, or, ideally both. The company that wins our pitch up today walks away with a pretty awesome prize. They get fast track past the Battlefield 200 application process straight into the final 200 companies. That means that they get tickets to TechCrunch Disrupt in September here in San Francisco, and they have a chance to be among the finalists that get to pitch in the Startup Battlefield at Disrupt. Massive audience, massive prizes, lots of fun. Each company has 5 minutes to pitch their company and 5 minutes to do a Q&A from myself and my good friends over here, the judges. If that sounds good, let's do this. First up is Susan pitching for Piction Health. Take it away, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, my name is Susan Conover. I'm co-founder and CEO of Piction Health, and I was first diagnosed with melanoma when I was 22. I tried to go see my dermatologist, but was told it would take at least 3 months to get in. And so I went to my PCP, who biopsied my mole, and it ended up being a stage 2 melanoma. That means if I had waited, I don't know if I would still be around today. And so, of course, this was a challenging experience, and I decided to focus my master's thesis at MIT on this topic in order to, change the game for people like me. So at Piction Health, we're building the largest dermatology practice in the world, supported by AI. Next slide. So I'm not the only one who's had skin issues. Turns out they're very common, and it's really hard to access people who really have expertise in it. 2.3 billion people around the world have skin issues every year that they actually seek help from a doctor for. A lot of those cases are managed in primary care, but these doctors misdiagnose about half of cases and really prefer to refer because they have so many things they're responsible for. Unfortunately, it's never been harder than it is today to see a dermatologist with wait times of 1 to 6 months or more. And that's perpetuated by the rise of cosmetics procedures like Botox and fillers. Next slide. So what we've built is a virtual dermatology practice that's AI enabled to address this. We provide high quality dermatology care within 48 hours, which is 17 times faster than the standard. Provide high quality care that's on par with in-person care. Our systems and our AI are trained to make this scalable. And we provide the end-to-end full solution for patients, what's known as virtual first care. Next slide, please. So what makes us special and different? Well, Piction Health is the only dermatology practice that's really designed and built for scale. What we care about is providing high quality, accessible care to everyone who needs it at an affordable price. And so Piction Health is distinguished in it's accessible for patients wherever they are, however they need care, and also scalable, which I will get into a little bit now. But basically, we've built the largest database in the world of skin disease photos. Next slide, please. So we built the largest and most actionable database in the world because we realized that there wasn't a previous, pre-existing database of skin disease photos. And if you know about AI, you know the data that you train on is critical. So in the pandemic, we built a database of over 1 million images from more than 200 dermatologists in more than 20 different countries. And we also have a partnership with a major academic medical center on the East Coast to build a best-in-class AI. And we partnered with dermatologists in India, South Africa, Tunisia, Spain, Bolivia, in order to create a database that's representative across all skin tones, which also doesn't exist in medical information and data today, to build an AI that works across all different skin tones. Next slide, please. So how it works is really simple. A patient can go on their phone, go to our website, take a few photos of their skin issue, answer some simple questions, and then once they submit their case, a dermatologist reviews it within 2 days and gets back to them with their diagnosis, personalized care plan. And if they need in-person care, we have partners in the states that we're open in to get quickly because they've already been assessed by an expert. So this enables, like, our workflow and technology design combined with our AI enables a dermatologist to see a case in less than a minute, which is more than 15 times faster than the current standard. So we're making dermatology care really scalable, which is hard to do in healthcare services, providing people fast care, providing people that high quality care, and allowing them to access it without leaving home. Next slide, please. We have an amazing team. I'm trained as a mechanical engineer and worked in management consulting before getting my product master's at MIT. I met my co-founder Pranav in Boston in an improv class, but he has over 10 years of cutting edge software R&D. And we have amazing machine learning experts, dermatology experts, and go-to-market healthcare experts to help us grow and scale. If you could advance to the next slide, please. And we've also raised a total of about $4 million to date, including Argonne VC, Fleur Capital, Techstars, and a few other funds and amazing angels.
Amazing. And that's you out of time.
Great.
Time for some Q&A.
Awesome.
Did you have a final thought to leave us with?
Yes. We have opened in New Hampshire and Connecticut, and today we're opening in Massachusetts. So you can go to pictionhealth.com on your phone and get high quality access to great dermatology care.
Amazing. Thank you. Great pitch. Dan or Bayal, do you have some questions for us?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. Great to hear your pitch. And one of the things that I look for as a healthcare investor is lived experience and understanding of the space. So it's really great that you have that, because I think it's just a really unique, special quality. How do you plan to monetize? What's the business model? Is it sort of direct to consumer, or is it going to be health plan monetized? And where are you on that journey?
Yeah, so it's the same way any dermatology practice makes money, through health insurance, reimbursement, and copays. And then while we're getting that coverage, we're taking self-pay for now. Our plan is to convert that once we have the data on improved outcomes and reduce costs to get value-based care contracts.
Yeah, I think that will be critical. I've got a portfolio company that's in the e-consult space, including dermatology, e-consults, including other specialties. And, getting sort of something beyond fee-for-service is critical to making the business model and the margins work. So thanks for your response to that question.
Absolutely.
Are there, thanks for your presentation. It was amazing. Are there competitors in this market? How do you look at the landscape currently? Because I've definitely seen AI being applied to things like dermatology. So I'm wondering, it would seem a pretty natural place, given it's very image focused. I'd imagine. I'm not a doctor, but how do you see the competitive landscape?
Yeah, so what we've seen in virtual dermatology care is there are a few different practices that deliver that, just directly connecting a dermatologist with a patient. But we haven't seen them actually use AI for enabling that workflow and that care, which to us is what sort of makes it scalable, which is important. I think also taking health insurance coverage. There are quite a few like D2C companies that will address your condition if you already know you have like acne or you have melasma, but what about patients who aren't sure? And so we help address some of that medical uncertainty and take insurance, right? So we're just like any other provider.
Yeah, one of the challenges with virtual care and AI and the intersection of those, I guess, in healthcare is trust. Having patients feel like they can trust you relative to going to MGH and seeing the derm, even though there is a wait list, perhaps. So how do you, strike that balance? Is it going to be first having the physicians, review to build the panel and the trust? And sidebar question: are your clinicians going to be W-2 or 1099, which matters? And then how do you expect to sort of build the patient panel, get the referrals, and build trust over time?
Yeah, lots of questions in there. How we build trust is important, incredibly important. That's one of the reasons that a dermatologist reviews and approves every case, no matter what, even if it takes them like 15, 30 seconds rather than 5 minutes, where we still have them in the loop on every case. So that I think is important for building trust. In terms of how we acquire patients, so we're working and partnering with PCPs in different states, working with ZocDoc and getting health insurance coverage, because a lot of our patients in our age segment that we're particularly focused on go to their health insurance portal first to see who's covered before going to a next step. And then you asked about if they're 1099 or W-2. So we've been working with folks that are 1099, but that they're very focused on sort of value-based care. And as we, raise more funding, we can, shift that to be more part-time or full-time direct employees, so we can have more control over that end-to-end patient experience.
Great. Any impact from the regulatory environment, especially the changes in telehealth? I think one of the things that, CMS is thinking through is where is virtual care really needed and actually delivers a medical ROI and decrease costs and improve outcomes, and where will it become sort of high utilization but high costs? And so any impact to your business there?
Yeah, so we're lucky in the sense that our value already aligns decently with CPT codes, so we don't have to have custom contracts every time with a payer. But then we're also we're doing synchronous audio video visits with an NP to both build trust with the patient and then also be able to align better with E&M codes that are currently paid for in-person care, but remotely. And that's partially how we determined our starting states of New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Massachusetts.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you to our judges. Awesome work, all of you. We are going to move on to Alison, who's going to whip us into an excited frenzy about Useful.
An excited frenzy. Woo.
I mean,
all right.
Set the high bar.
Well, thank you, Susan, for kicking it off. And nice to meet you all. I'm Alison Cove. I'm founder and CEO of Useful. So, I just tried to advance the slide, but I realized I don't have control. Next slide, please. I'll start by addressing the problem, and it's that we're creating a lot of waste, specifically from our takeout packaging. So to-go cups, salad containers, clamshells, you name it. It's ending up in our landfills or in New England, incinerators, the oceans, or our sidewalk. And the current solutions to address this plastic epidemic really aren't working. Recycling is nothing more than wish cycling, unfortunately. And the composting packaging that we all thought was the silver bullet, unfortunately, has some serious issues. Next slide, please. Compounding this, there's a real urgency for zero waste. I'd say it's reaching a fever pitch. Reusable solutions are being mandated by governments and universities alike. Next slide, please. And campus dining managers are being told to essentially figure it out. So COVID introduced a world where takeout food was the norm. And they've opened Pandora's box. They can't put it back in. Takeout is here to stay. Simultaneously, they need to meet these zero waste goals. And so they're scratching their heads thinking, how on earth do we do that? Well, next slide, please. I'll introduce you to Useful. We have developed the technology, container inventory, and business model to properly address the pain points of our campus partners. We have really developed the most comprehensive and cost-effective solution on the market today. I'll start by describing our inventory on the next slide. So we have designed and contract manufactured our stainless steel returnable takeout solution. This delivers a superior user experience, food safety, durability, you name it. We are entirely plastic free because we firmly believe that you can't solve a plastic problem with more plastic. We've sourced recycled stainless steel for our containers. We use double wall vacuum insulated technology, so it really helps to keep your food or drink hot or cold for 5+ hours. It's really Yeti-like quality. Next slide, please. Pair that with our technology. So on the left, you'll see a screenshot of our app. This is what we use to enable the checkouts and returns, which I'll describe on the next slide. And on the right, on this slide, Actually, you go back. Yeah, thank you. On the right on this slide, you'll see impact dashboard. This is what is often projected in a student union or dining hall. And this in real time updates with the number of units checked out and what that equates to in waste mitigated and other impacts. That same data is available on the individual level, but I'd say it's really powerful at the full campus level. Next slide, please. So we have developed a library-like solution that really streamlines rentals and returns for an enjoyable and environmentally friendly takeout solution. So our solution is entirely free to users so long as they return their inventory. And we have a very simple process of checking out, enjoying it from anywhere from 2 to 14 days for that free rental period, and then returning it anywhere on campus. Next slide, please. So our solution requires no capital for the college, saves them money, and is easy and turnkey to implement. We rent our inventory to our campuses, and that helps them save at least 25% against single-use comparisons, while maintaining a healthy profit margin for us. We have a profit margin of roughly 86%, and in our 3-year contracts, we are cash flow positive within 3 to 6 months. So our campus partners don't have to go out and buy inventory instead and tap into that capital budget. Instead, they can really just leverage their operations budget and save money by partnering with us. Next slide, please. So this is repeatable, scalable, and wildly profitable. We're starting with campuses, and we estimate that campus tangible market to be about $1.7 billion. And I realize I just messed up TAM. I said tangible market. Anyway, we've also looked at the adjacent market. This includes corporate campuses, hospitals, and the like, and estimate that to be about $20.6 billion. Next slide, please. So by 2026, we anticipate partnering with a total of 160 campuses with roughly $47 million in revenue. Next slide. And today we've successfully implemented 2 college campuses to really prove and refine our technology, containers, workflow, and end user experience. As we speak today, we are launching a 3rd college, St. Olaf, in Minnesota. And then we are working to launch many more campuses for fall semester of this year. Next slide, please. We are currently launching a seed fundraising round to build out our sales and marketing team so that we can continue to scale our business now that we've really proven the model, the technology, and the inventory. So thank you very much for listening. My name again is Allison, and great to meet you all. Thank you.
Absolutely perfect timing. Time for some Q&A.
Yeah, this is really interesting. We've focused a lot on how to reduce plastics in my venture capital fund. I guess my question is so do you have to set up a processing plant, to clean, or do you leverage the university's, kitchen facilities to basically manage your inventory?
Exactly. It's the latter. So just a quick anecdote. When I first started in Boston, and Dan, you might even remember this way back when, I was also working at CIC on the 17th floor, and my first pilot was at Render downstairs. And we were just doing a cup exchange program to see if people were comfortable with the idea. And at that point, I was doing centralized dishwashing. And what I realized is that centralized dishwashing is probably the fastest way to go broke. It's not an efficient business model. And so this business model really leverages existing infrastructure with our partners. It's just so much more efficient for both us and them. And so, yes, we are leveraging the infrastructure that they have on campus.
Thanks for the pitch, Allison. It was really interesting. And I need to circle back to your comment on the composting bags at some point, since I'm recently started composting. So I'd love to learn more. But yes. On your go-to-market, why campuses as the initial target market, especially given the TAM, which seems big, but in the grand scheme is sort of, venture capital, sort of small-ish. You'd like to see a multi-billion-dollar TAM, as opposed to corporates or going to a Sweetgreen or brand of the sorts and sort of trying to do something like that?
Sure. So campuses, frankly, they are driven to have students on campus right now. Their revenue is entirely tied to having those students on campus, whereas corporate offices have really been struggling these past few years, figuring out how to get people back to the office. Are they even going to reopen their cafe? So while do have some letters of intent from corporate offices, we haven't been focusing there because their revenue is not tied to having bodies on campus. At a college campus, they need to solve this today. They need to have those students there. They need to be offering a really superior takeout experience for those students while meeting their impact goals, their zero waste goals. I think our long-term goal is to partner with fast casual and the like. That just back to the history of this business. When I first launched it, we were going cafe to cafe in Boston. Unfortunately, we are not there yet as a society here in the US. We do have some communities that have banned single use. So for example, we have a partnership out in Marin County, California, with some grocery stores and cafes, et cetera. And that we're live out there because they have a ban on single use takeout. So folks are charged 25 cents if they choose single use over our free reusable. So we're getting there is the answer.
Okay.
Just very quickly, like, who do you think might buy a company like this? I hate to ask the traditional venture capital question, but like, are there strategic players who might, food service that would be interested in something like that? Or do you see like kind of build a revenue model, build a profitable business, and it's more of like a private equity exit?
Absolutely. So we actually saw one of our competitors get acquired by Grubhub. And so I think our sweet spot is we also integrate with campus card solutions. So those campus card providers, Seaboard, Blackboard/Transact, TouchNet, as well as the RMark, Sodexo, Compass Groups of the world. Those are some of the players that I see ultimately acquiring us.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any sort of FDA considerations or anything like that around?
Our inventory is FDA approved, as well as California Proposition 65.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I was wondering if you were aware of any other regulatory things that are coming down the pipe. You mentioned Marin. Are there other conversations happening in local or more bigger communities?
Yes. So I was actually at the aquarium, the New England Aquarium, last week or the week before, unveiling some draft legislation to enable the circular economy in Massachusetts. So that is up at Beacon Hill right now. I also know that the city of Boston is looking into extending the plastic bag ban to include other packaging types. So we are on the precipice of this change. And it's really exciting to see it all happening. And I think we are really well positioned to be able to leap when that legislation does pass.
Nice. Well done, Alison. And thank you again to the judges. And last but not least, we have Chrissy, who's pitching Penny Finance. Are you with us, Chrissy?
I'm here.
All right, let's do it.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Chrissy Cole. I'm the founder and CEO of Penny Finance. Do you know a woman in your life who is uncomfortable managing their money or investing? I bet somebody pops into your mind immediately. We as women are told, get that degree, get that job, and financial freedom will follow. But for my grandmother, for my mother, and for me, that did not work. Not only did my grandmother work till she was 75 years old, she did that while caring for me and my brother after school, while my mom worked 70-hour weeks. Now, as the circle of life continues, my mom is at retirement age of 65, still working, not planning to retire ever, while she takes care of my 10-month-old baby on Fridays, nights, and weekends while I run this startup. Next slide, please. Women are retiring with 1/3 the wealth of men because of an investing gap, not an education gap, not a pay gap, an investment gap. Next slide, please. This is because 80% of women are not investing their money. And the real reason is because women hold a disproportionate amount of debt in this country from being more educated since the 80s. 2/3, to be exact, 2/3 of student loan debt in this country is held by women. Women have the same credit scores as men. We're saving at the same rates, but we're stuck servicing our loans. So we get into the investment game too late, if ever. Over my decade in wealth management at Goldman Sachs, it was not the investing know-how or the access to these male-oriented whisper networks or the really great 401k matching program that got me out of my student debt and into investing. It was my mom, a role model, a mentor, a teacher. She showed me how to chip away at the loans, how to use my credit cards to make money, how just $100 in your 401k at 22 could make a difference. The list goes on. Next slide. There are 250,000 financial advisors in America. But if you don't have $100,000 in net worth, an advisor will not talk to you. 70% of women have less than $100,000 in net worth. So for those 70% of women who do not have access to a financial advisor, Penny Finance is their online financial mentor. Next slide. Penny is a $10 a month subscription to a virtual advisor. So similar to Piction, who is a virtual dermatology center, we are a virtual financial advisor. Our online tool basically takes your money goals and your current financial situation, and we create a custom calculated plan without the need to talk to an advisor, all using back-end technology. How it works is members answer 13 questions about their finances, and they instantly get access to a suite of 50 bite-sized educational modules that are ranked in order of where to start first based on their numbers and their goals. Then they self-power through these, continue to enter their numbers, and get instant insights about their money. Think, pay $54 on your loans. They then receive automated email nudges and personal insights and money to-dos that tell you how to increase your cash flow today and retire with wealth tomorrow. And then on top of that, as a member of Penny, you become part of a female-only financial peer group because we know that as women in particular, we avoid finances because of anxiety, fear, shame, envy. Unlike all the financial apps out there that focus on one step in the journey, we cover the full financial journey. So the way I like to explain it is where Mint stops at budgeting and Ellevest starts at investing, we help you navigate all the life events in between. Home buying, credit cards, getting the extra degree, having kids with 529 accounts, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. We want every woman, of course, who doesn't have a financial advisor to have Penny, but you can't be everything for everyone. Today, we serve working women in salaried jobs, ages 25 to 50, who have debt and less than 100K in wealth. That's 15 million women. Next slide, please. We were able to accomplish this without any outside funding for 2 years, although we did raise our pre-seed last month, and a very passionate, scrappy, flexible majority freelance team of engineers and marketers, of which we have 8 women who have experienced the problem at varying levels. Next slide, please. 7,000 women are using Penny as their virtual advisor today, and we're seeing them grow their wealth at a factor of 10x and also cutting their time till debt-free by an average of 6 years. That has allowed us to achieve 10,000 in MRR this past month and grow almost 1,000% last year with 1,500 paying members who are paying $10 a month. Next slide. We today are so excited to announce results of our first 3 pilots with Fortune 500 employers, where we are working with them to offer Penny as a financial benefit to women who are part of their women employee resource groups. Unlike standard financial benefits like a 401k or an HSA, Penny has a 45% adoption rate, which is 4.5 times the national average. And we also were able to drive 30% more participation in company-sponsored retirement accounts, which is a big goal for companies right now.
And you're coming up on time.
Okay. The big question we think about at Penny, and we get from investors all the time, if you can go to the next slide, is can you offer this truly affordable consumer finance at $10 a month? And the answer is yes. Our blended CAC is $10. Our LTV today is $100. Our LTV tomorrow should be $280. Next slide, last slide. We are incredibly excited to offer a digital-first financial well-being and education platform to every female employee in America, and we cannot wait to partner with more companies to close the pay equity and wealth gap, because who wants to work till they're 80? I certainly do not, and that is what I'm on track to be doing. So thank you so much for having me here today, and I'm excited to take questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Can I jump in with a question first?
Of course.
I'm super excited to hear you go through the numbers. You mentioned that you had a certain number of paying customers, but the number of actual people on the platform which was much bigger. What's the discrepancy there?
So we're a freemium model. Anyone can take our free money quiz, which is 13 questions and tells you 2 things about your money, your future net worth and your time till debt free. Also getting access to some educational content, but then to get access to the 50 custom financial plans, which is the meat of the product, where it impersonates sitting down with a financial advisor and you get your recommendations, that you need to pay for. That's $10 a month. So we have 7,000 members in our community, of which 1,500 are paying, whether their company is paying for it or they're paying for it.
Amazing. Thank you. Dan or Payal?
Thanks, Chrissy. Great presentation. And also great to see that you come from the wealth management experience. I'm sure that's very useful. Maybe related to that, like you said, you can't be everything for everyone, but if there's something in the app or some alpha that makes it particularly useful for women, would a man go on the app and find it similarly useful? So is it sort of a customer acquisition reason, or is there something about the content and something you provide that makes it particularly useful for women?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So generally, the financial advice is gender neutral. It's for a low risk investor who does not have a ton of money, and someone who's not going to be investing in private equity or hedge funds, right? Traditional portfolio. However, the things that are unique for women in the product are modules around family and kids, because generally 80% of women manage the day-to-day finances at home. So thinking about 529 accounts and fertility planning, things like that. Again, we have some men in our platform and men can certainly use it. The target of women is more of the marketing strategy and the brand and building a place where women feel welcome. When I think about Penny long-term, like 10 years from now, I can see the back-end infrastructure and rules-based financial advising tools being used for everyone everywhere for financial education, because most of the content is just general advice.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks for that presentation. And I've actually looked at some other like affinity-related platforms similar to this. And I'm sort of wondering, because we talked about this before, what kind of regulatory requirements do you have to meet? I mean, are you a registered financial advisor, or you're able to be under the radar screen for that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. You only need to become a registered investment advisor if you're recommending individual securities that someone buys. So for example, go buy VOO. We don't do that. We are strictly financial education, and all of our recommendations are calculator based and based on my brain as a licensed financial professional, and then public data sources like the IRS or Modern Portfolio Theory. So if we were to offer financial products like a robo-advisor or a credit card, we would need to get licensed. Or if we recommended, make these changes to your 401k and buy these XYZ funds, then we would have to be a registered investment advisor.
And so just to follow up, that's good to hear. And have you thought about, other than corporates, which makes a lot of sense to me, have you thought about going to retailers where there's sort of often credit card debt, or, and using that as a channel partner?
No, that is a fantastic idea. On the credit card side of the house, some of the things that we've thought about is partnering with people like Amex and MasterCard, who really, really, really care about financial health, because the stronger the borrower, the better. And so we've thought about, joining their marketplaces and offering Penny as an educational tool, or partnering with companies that have a population of women who use their products. Like it doesn't have to be a financial company. So, but that's a wonderful idea.
Chrissy, how would you increase that LTV? Maybe it's just nascent data, but sort of that 10-month LTV.
Yeah.
How do you get people to
There's
stay
a couple
longer?
things. One, we're launching multiple subscription options this year where we offer a product where you get more for $30 a month. Another thing that we are doing is we are going to build a market of trusted partners because we're not going to offer financial products. And one of the things our members ask us for all the time is, what high yield savings account should I open? Where should I open my IRA? And so it's a natural lead gen tool where we can, build the affiliate revenue side of the business.
Amazing. That's us on time. Thank you so much. That's all we have for you for now. So we will say a huge thank you to Susan, Alison, and Chrissy for pitching your companies in our pitch competition. And a huge thanks to our judges, Pavel and Dan, who are now going to be contemplating who is the winner of this pitch competition. Thank you all so much. This is super fun to watch. And here's Matt once again with a few closing words from Boston.
That was great. I really enjoy hosting these City Spotlight. Boston is a fantastic area filled with amazing companies, the world-class institutions, and just the best investors. So please get involved in the Boston area if you're there. And if not, you might want to consider moving your company. I sure would. Now, I have 2 dates that you need to write down. One is April 20th. That's TechCrunch Early Stage. It's our founders only summit in the Boston area. Tickets are still available, and I'm told they're available at a discount right now too. The second date is June 14th. TechCrunch Live is taking another virtual tour, but this time we're going to Atlanta. Atlanta is a wonderful area with great institutions as well too, and I would argue better food than Boston. So please tune in on June 14th. And until then, I'm Matt Burns. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.